What's the whole concept behind the Enjoy By?
Okay, we think that, like a lot of brewers, we think IPA needs to be drank fresh. You know, it needs to be fresh when you drink it, and you know, as soon as the beer is put in a bottle or a keg, the hop character is going to start to fade. So we wanted to have an IPA that we would be sure that nobody would ever taste the beer stale, or you know, everybody who got to taste it would taste it at its optimum. And what that meant was having a beer where we pulled it off the shelves if it hit 35 days from the bottling date.
How'd you come up with 35 days?
It came through a combination of things. It was a number we thought we could work with, and we also knew the beer would taste good based on our tasting panels and things like that. But, you know, the whole idea is, you know, we brew this really hop-forward, fresh IPA. We brew it in small batches. We only send it to specific areas. We work directly with the wholesalers in those areas and the accounts, the people that are selling the beer, you know, either bars or stores. And just make sure everybody's on the same page as far as what the concept is. The beer needs to move, you know, and if it's not moving, if it's on the shelf 35 days after the package date, we're going to come and take it back. And so far that hasn't happened. Usually the beer's gone in about 2 weeks, so.
Hey, we gotta get rid of this beer. On day 34, go, taking it back.
Yeah, I remember somebody posted something on Facebook. He had a picture of the first batch of beer, and the picture was dated like 2 days after the final date, and it had turned black. And I mean, it was a joke post, you know. It's just some guy making a joke, and I thought it was really funny. It's you know, the beer's not gonna, you know, it's not like the beer's gonna take a turn at 35 days and just go into this. Yeah, you know, that's not the point. The point is, you know, we want people to taste it at its most fresh. And that's really, and we've set up the program, the way we brew the beer, the way we distribute the beer, you know, who we sell the beer to and everything, so that people who are going to get to try it are going to try it within that real fresh window.
And how do we earn that right to get the distribution?
Well, there's a lot of social media involved in this whole thing. So, you know, there's a specific website for the beer where you can go in and make requests to get it to your area, and, you know, and our team is counting those things. And then, you know, on the website itself, it also has the Enjoy-O-meter. So, you know, all the social media interaction from the areas where the beer is, the dial will move up or down depending on, you know, how many responses are being thrown at it. And yeah, it's cool stuff. It's new stuff all the way around, you know.
I want to talk about your inspiration for writing your IPA book.
Well, I don't know if it was inspiration. The Brewers Publications approached us and asked us if we would be interested in doing the project. And, you know, we said yes, of course. And originally I was working with Steve Wagner, on the book. And, you know, because we're growing so incredibly fast, you know, Steve couldn't really commit to it, you know. And so I took it on myself to try and finish it up. And, yeah, it took about 3 years, and you know, originally when we first started talking about it, it was going to be one of the classic style series books, you know, which are not huge books, but as I started talking to people and researching it, I started digging up all this history and historical information on India Pale Ale, and I talked with Christy Switzer, who's a publisher or the editor of Brewers Publications, and I just said, you know, Christy, we could lay out this book different, you know. We could do it, you know, kind of chronologically and just talk about IPA brewing during different periods in time. And so I kind of got sucked into all the history part of it and just dove in, man, because there's some great information out there. I started with like Google Books, and then I was on a trip to England, and I got to talk to some people that knew a lot about historical English IPAs, and they gave me a lot of great information, and I just took off from there.
I guess it's a lot different from the original IPAs, well, the ones that were shipped to India.
Well, you know, they are and they aren't. I mean, there's a couple of major differences, but if you look at the analytical specs, they're probably pretty similar. You know, if you look at, you know, the color of the beer, the fermentability of the beer, the alcohol content of the beer, not too far off. Nobody knows what the bitterness was back then, but they were using astronomical amounts of hops in these beers, you know, and then a lot of English beers were using a lot of hops like that. So it wasn't unique to IPA, which is one of the things that I found out that I thought was interesting. It wasn't like IPA was something, you know, the hopping rates were they weren't even as high as some other beers.
I think that's what's funny about it, though. You know, the original concept of the IPA back in the 1800s.
Yeah, 1700s and 1800s. Yeah,
was to preserve the beer to make the trip to India. Yet now we're doing the enjoy by because the hops actually deteriorate.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I don't know, you know, whether anybody has really looked at this seriously to see if hops from different growing areas age differently in the bottle. I'm kind of starting to think that maybe they do, but you know, nothing to confirm that. But you know, one of the most interesting things I found out was that the beer in Burton-on-Trent, when they got into the IPA brewing game, their beers were aged 12 to 16 months in a barrel before it even got put on a boat. So, you know, back then they didn't have refrigeration in the breweries. You know, they really hadn't come around yet. And so they would brew the beer. They would use really fresh ingredients, brew the IPA in the early fall, let it go through a primary fermentation, put it in a barrel, bung it up, and put it in a warehouse. And then in the summertime, as the temperature warmed up, they'd debung the beer, and the yeast would reactivate and finish the fermentation. And then they'd seal it up again, and then a few months later, they'd put it on a boat to India. You know, so by the time it got to India, it could be almost 2 years old. Totally different way, huh? Yeah, totally different approach. I was surprised by that. I didn't realize that the beer went through that kind of aging before it even got put on a boat. It's interesting because you know, a lot of the theories that people have put forth about the India Pale Ale and the origins are based on price lists and newspaper advertisements and things like that. The beers were priced based on their strength, so you can kind of figure out where IPA fell in, you know, between things like double stouts and milds and stuff like that. So that was pretty interesting stuff. I think, you know, the thing that, you know, the brewers back then apparently knew that putting more hops in a beer would preserve it. So that was kind of like a standard practice for any beer going on boats anyway. It wasn't unique to IPA. And some of the beers were hopped at much higher rates even, you know, than IPA, which I thought was interesting. So
that's the same idea of how ports became popular. They fortified wine to ship them.
Yeah,
and something entirely different.
I don't know, you know, like Madeira sherry and things like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know enough about the history of those beverages, you know, to comment. But you know, I don't know.
That's kind of like the same concept. We need to ship this, but we'll fortify it, and then it'll be good when it gets there.
And then it'll be good when it gets there. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. The history's amazing.
Yeah, it is.